All right, welcome back, everybody. We are prepared to hear our final petitioner case of the day. Judge, the meeting is yours.
All right, thank you. Before we go on the record, Mr. Johnson, I confirmed before we got started that you have the exhibits with you, yes? And I saw that you uploaded an additional exhibit, yes? Okay, good. So we'll go on the record for in just a moment. I will announce the case and then I will just confirm that you have been sitting through these hearings. And so I'm sure you're quite familiar with the procedure by now. Okay. All right. As soon as our court reporter tells me she's ready, I'm getting a yes. All right. On the record. We are on the record. It is May 8th, 2025. It's 1:19 p.m. We're here in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation of Scott Johnson. This is case number 2002-01-70000391. OAH case number 2025-040-351. This matter is being heard before the Board of Behavioral Sciences, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California. Previously, the board members had stated their appearance for the record, and we do have a quorum. As I mentioned, my name is Marcy Larson. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, presiding over the matter this afternoon. I'm now going to ask our court reporter to please state her name and her CSR number.
Maria Esquivel Parkinson, CSR number 10621.
And if the Deputy Attorney General would please state your appearance for the record.
Anahita Crawford, Deputy Attorney General, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California pursuant to Government Code Section 11522.
And Mr. Johnson, you are representing yourself this afternoon? All right, and I don't think the microphone is on.
How about now?
It's working now. Oh,
That is correct.
okay. And you can just go ahead and leave it on. Good. You understand that you could have had an attorney represent you at your own expense?
Yes, I do. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here.
Yeah, you're good. Yep, I can hear you now. And you're choosing to represent yourself, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So before we went on the record, I confirmed you have been sitting in the audience through the 3 previous petition hearings, correct?
That's correct.
You understand the rules and how things will proceed.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
You understand that because you're petitioning and seeking early termination of your probation, that you have the burden of proving to the board your probation should be terminated early. You understand this?
Yes, I do.
All right. I also confirmed off the record that you have access to the exhibits, and there was an additional exhibit that you uploaded that I will address as well.
Yes.
All right. With that, Ms. Crawford, if you would please give the board a brief overview of the history of discipline in this matter.
Yes, Your Honor. A statement of issues was filed on August 15th of 2012, which denied petitioner's application for registration as an associate marriage and family therapist. On October 13th of 2013, pursuant to a decision after non-adoption, the petitioner was issued an associate marriage and family therapist registration, which was placed on probation for 5 years. The basis for the probation was that petitioner had been convicted of driving without a license in 2006 and a wet reckless in 2010 with a blood alcohol content of 0.20. In April of 2017, the board filed a petition to revoke probation based on petitioner failing to practice his profession for 3 years or maintaining a valid registration. Effective September 2018, a new stipulation was signed, which superseded the prior action and placed petitioner on probation again for another 5 years, with terms including requiring petitioner to undergo a psych eval. The petitioner's psychological evaluation found him to be unfit to practice at that time, and the board ordered petitioner to cease practice immediately, effective December of 2018. As a result of the finding, the board filed a petition to revoke probation, which was filed in February of 2019 and denied effective December of 2019. Petitioner then told his probation for 4 years until he secured employment in 2022. Therefore, his probation is due to terminate on September 5th of 2027. Since being placed on probation in 2013, petitioner has served approximately 22.5 years of probation while employed, and another 2.5 years remain of his probationary period. Petitioner is requesting early termination of his probation. He was ordered to comply with mental health evaluation, psychotherapy, supervised practice, and education courses, and he is fully compliant with his probation terms.
All right, if you would please address the exhibits.
Yes, Exhibit 1 is the case summary prepared by probation analyst Craig Zimmerman to the board regarding the petitioner's background. Exhibit 2 is a certificate of license history for the petitioner. Exhibit 3 is the notice of hearing for today's hearing date. Exhibit 4 is the petition for early termination of probation filed by the petitioner. Exhibit 5 contains the documents filed by the petitioner in support of his petition for early termination. Exhibit 6 contains the psychotherapy information sheet and release of information. Exhibit 7 is the supervised practice information sheet and release of information. Exhibit 8 is the underlying disciplinary document, which is the statement of issues and the decision after non-adoption. Exhibit 9 is the petition to revoke probation and decision, which became effective in 2019. And Exhibit 10 is the first amended petition to revoke probation and stipulated settlement, which was effective in 2018. We would like to mark and introduce these exhibits at this time.
Mr. Johnson, have you reviewed the documents that make up exhibits 1 through 10?
Yes, I have.
Any objection?
No, thank you.
Exhibits 1 through 10 are admitted. And then, Ms. Crawford, I'm going to go ahead and address Exhibit A, which are the additional letters that Mr. Johnson uploaded. Did you have an opportunity to look at those?
I have, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No.
All right, Exhibit A is admitted.
I have no other evidence to present at this time, Your Honor, and would just reserve on questioning the petitioner.
All right, Mr. Johnson, I'm now going to swear you in. If you would please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat. And please state and spell your name.
Scott Johnson, SCOTTJOHNSON.
All right, Mr. Johnson, now is your opportunity to address the board, to provide any testimony that you wish to. And if you're going to read from something, just remember to do so slowly.
Thank you. I do have a few notes here. I don't plan to read them verbatim, but just to help me remember to stay on track. Good afternoon, Judge Larson and members of the board. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here today. I want to also acknowledge and thank my husband, John, for sitting here with me today. It's been a long journey. The legal documents submitted into evidence don't really demonstrate the length of the process that I have been involved in with the board. My license was originally disciplined with the board in 2013. I originally applied for what was then called an intern registration number in the fall of 2009 when I finished my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. At that time, I failed to disclose driving with an out-of-state license. I was not driving with a no license, but I had a Utah state license. But the arresting officer was very cruel and stole my license, mailed it to the Utah DMV where they destroyed it. So then I had no license until I got a California state license. But nevertheless, the conviction stuck. At any rate, I failed to disclose that on my intern application at that time. While the board was reviewing that and wondering about those failures to appear and the driving without a license conviction that I'd failed to disclose, I was convicted or arrested and later convicted for driving under the influence of alcohol. And in my fear and poor judgment at that time, I tried to minimize the charge. So I was ultimately convicted of a reckless driving charge and not a full-blown DUI, thinking that I could protect my licensing pathway. But because of the blood alcohol content, which was nearly 3 times the legal limit, the board frowned upon my reckless driving charge and denied my intern application and later put me on a first 5-year term of probation. So I started that in October of 2013, and my sobriety date is October 10, 2013. I started off at a pretty good pace, fully compliant with all the terms and conditions of my probation. However, in February of 2014, I underwent my first of 3 psychological evaluations. And that first psychological evaluation found me to be dangerous to practice. I was not told at that time what the diagnosis was. It was kind of a bait and switch modality the board was using at that time. Probationees were not allowed to know what they were being treated for, but a term of that diagnosis was to be treated in weekly psychotherapy for a minimum of 2 years, and then to be evaluated again to see if I was cured of my problem. But again, I didn't know what the problem was. So I continued to go to weekly therapy and be fully sober and compliant with the terms and conditions of my probation. However, my treating therapist suffered a very serious stroke and nearly lethal heart attack 1 year into that 2-year period and almost died. So then I found myself without a therapist to complete the second required year before being reevaluated again. I had left my job seeing clients at that time before receiving the poor diagnosis, so that was kind of fortuitous. I was finishing my doctoral studies at Loma Linda University, completing a longitudinal research study, and therefore I didn't have insurance and I didn't have a lot of cash coming in. So finding a therapist to replace my ailing one was nearly impossible. So my probation analyst at that time, Julie McAuliffe, sent me a letter in March of 2015 stating she was going to violate my probation and potentially revoke the first 5-year term if I didn't comply with this therapy piece, so we could have me reevaluated again. And despite several attempts on my part, I think I talked to 7 or 8 therapists at that time, none of whom would do it pro bono, and none of whom wanted to take on that liability of the reports to the board and et cetera, without any reimbursement. So, but I was in constant contact with Julie. However, then there came this 18-month pause where I didn't hear from the board or my analyst at all. Suddenly, in the fall of 2016, I received a letter from an analyst whom I never had any communication from, Flora Lopez, who informed me that she'd already referred my file to the Office of the Attorney General to revoke my first 5-year term. And I had never been given an opportunity to be evaluated again to see if I was fit to practice. I wasn't able to practice. My probation should have been told, meaning frozen. So when the board revoked my probation for non-practice for 3 years, it was very disappointing because I couldn't practice because of this negative psych eval result, nor was I given the chance to be evaluated again. So after hiring an attorney and working with the board, they agreed to allow to give me a new probation term, as has been stated today, a new 5-year term, and I was evaluated afresh. However, as has been stated this afternoon, that evaluation result was again very poor. But then I was evaluated a third time, which was not mentioned today, and the third evaluator went ahead and debunked the first 2 psychological evaluations and gave me a clean bill of mental health. His name was Dr. Garman. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why I've been able to practice the last 2 years and 7 months at my current employ. So when we say I've been on probation for 2.5 years, in my mind, it's been 11 years. I've been sober for over 11 years and 7 months since my sobriety date of 10/10/2013. I've never had a relapse. I've never had another DUI or any kind of legal infraction, barring a seatbelt ticket or a cell phone while driving ticket. I've striven to develop myself clinically. I went on to finish my PhD in marriage and family therapy at Loma Linda, successfully defending my doctoral dissertation in November of 2017 while on probation. My dissertation study was focused on the substance abuse treatment experience of men who have sex with men. While seeing clients before that negative first psychological evaluation, part of my job was working with men in a substance abuse rehab facility. And so many of the men I worked with in therapy shared with me that while under the influence of substances or in order to obtain their substance of choice, they would participate in sexual activities with other men. But because of the homophobic milieu in the treatment facility itself and in the California State Correctional Facility Program, they weren't able to get help for their issues because they would be branded as less than, they would be victimized, sexually assaulted in custody, which is rampant today, unfortunately. So my study, the findings were significant that if treatment staff, therapists, drug and alcohol counselors, other participants in treatment were more accepting and more open-minded towards all kinds of experiences involving substance abuse, people are more likely to stay sober in the long run. Sorry, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole with the psychological evaluations, but prior to the evaluation, I had worked clinically since 2001 in a variety of clinical settings. So from 2001 until 2014, no clinical supervisor, no employer, no client had ever filed a complaint against me with the board. No one at Loma Linda University on the master's or doctoral levels had ever had any concerns about my fitness for practice. My evaluations as a student were high. And then suddenly, this psychologist who never even met me in person, I did an MMPI-2, sight unseen. She analyzes the data with the bubble sheet according to my responses, and suddenly I'm dangerous to practice. I can't understand what went wrong there. I never met the woman. I don't even know what she looks like. I just know her name from 2014. So it's been a long road. At any rate, I'd like to focus on the positive things that have come out of my sobriety. I've worked very hard to put some of these defaming experiences to the side and to focus on what is really important, which is truly my sobriety today. Um, I grew up in the LDS church, so alcohol is verboten. So I didn't start consuming alcohol till I was in my 30s, which many of my friends today laugh and think I'm joking, but it's true. Mormons do not drink alcohol. Mormons do not drink coffee. Mormons do not drink tea. Mormons don't smoke pot. You know, we don't do any of that stuff. So when I was in my 30s, I started to try alcohol for the first time. And around 2006-ish is when I was starting to try alcohol. So I didn't know my limits. I didn't know how it could affect me. And that's unfortunately when I incurred this reckless driving charge in 2010. I know it sounds naive. I know it sounds stupid. However, I also know that my use of alcohol was simply a symptom of the turmoil that I was going through as an adult at that time in my life. As I just stated, I was raised in the LDS church. The LDS church also has very strict views on homosexuals and homosexuality. You cannot be an open and authentic gay person and be actively involved and accepted in the Mormon church. So I couldn't be who I am today and be a member of that religious group. And it was very dear to me. I attended Brigham Young University for my undergraduate. I served an LDS mission in Norway for 2 years, and I loved it. And I thought I would marry a woman and have a big Mormon family. Not the polygamous kind, but the regular kind. And but as you can see today, my spouse is not a woman, and so far we do not have any children. But the fat lady hasn't sung yet on that possibility. But at any rate, so my alcohol use at that time in my 30s was a symptom of what I was going through in my life. I was struggling to accept myself, who I was. It was kind of an identity crisis. And alcohol helped me numb out the pain, helped me numb those voices, those condemning voices inside that made me not like myself. And looking back, I think if anything on those psychological evaluations, the first two, my contempt and my anger and my rage shone through on those assessments that those two first psychologists did with me, because I was very angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the world. I was angry at my family for rejecting me and my former church for rejecting me because of who I was, because I'd given so much of my life and so much of my service and my money to that organization. And it's still, I believe to this day, a wonderful organization. If you are straight and if you have a little bit of money, it's great for you. But if you're gay or have gay kids, it'll be problematic. So that was one of the roots of my alcohol abuse during those years. So I'm grateful that I did get that DUI in 2013, or excuse me, 2010. And I'm grateful that I didn't hurt anyone with my car. And I'm grateful for the chance that this whole probation episode, the last 11 years, has given me to do a lot of soul searching. The terms and conditions of my probation have been very helpful. I have worked with several wonderful therapists over these last 11 years. My current therapist, we've been together since 2018. She started working with me towards the end of my first 5-year probation term. And then we picked up again recently these last 2.5 years. And we meet each other every week. And she's been so helpful and just absolutely wonderful, calling me out on things that she can see that I don't see. And it's been shared earlier today with one of the other probationees. Every good therapist should have a good therapist. And I can see how my personal work on myself helps me with the people I work with on a daily basis at the clinic. Anyway, maybe I'm rambling, but I've done a lot over this last decade. I've been involved in Alcoholics Anonymous very much. I've served as treasurer of my local AA meeting, secretary of my local AA meeting, and my little recovering Mormon self was actually the coffee maker in my local AA meeting. I go 4 or 5 times a week, including a Saturday big book study, and I brought my big book with me today. It's kind of a visual aid. I joined a choir in Redlands, California, the Community Chorus of Redlands. I love to sing, and we do a lot of volunteer concerts, free concerts throughout the year. One of the letters of support in the exhibit I submitted was from a member of the choir. And my husband and I also belong to a wonderful church that accepts all people, not just the straights, not just the white, but all people. And we've been members there for about 15 years and very involved with our church community. As far as making sure that I'm safe to practice as a licensee or associate, I try my very best to educate any client that I come in contact with regarding the dangers of substance use or abuse. Even if they're just vaping or smoking cigarettes, I work with a lot of adolescents who vape, and I talk with them about the potential dangers of starting out with that practice. And I have a framed copy of the Serenity Prayer on my office wall, which is a wonderful conversational piece. And I'm not afraid to share about my own recovery when it's appropriate. My husband and I also love to travel. We love to camp, hike. Recently, we were up in Yosemite National Park. So communing with nature and with God and the animals is a big part of my recovery. Just trying to stay connected with our higher power and the beautiful creation that surrounds us here in California. Anyway, I'm embarrassed to say I've probably derailed myself a bit, but during those periods of tolling, when I wasn't able to practice safely, I sought out employment opportunities that allowed me to serve in the communities in which we lived. For example, I worked in the special education department for San Bernardino Unified School District. I deal with a mild form of cerebral palsy myself, and so I wanted to give back to special education students on the high school level. And it was so wonderful to see how they would just light up to see, well, if Mr. Johnson can do this and he's finishing his doctorate, I can definitely finish my high school diploma, for example. And then after working at the school, I went on to work with CPS, working with parents and families to reunify after having their children removed because of drug and alcohol related offenses. And so I have a lot of compassion for my probation analysts with the board, because I have been doing with CPS what they do for us, monitoring the drug testing, the therapy, the classes, all that same stuff, all the terms and conditions. That's what we make parents do to get their kids back here in California for a lot shorter time, by the way, and a lot less money too. It's funny, they can get their kids back for a bargain. Anyway, and then now at Renewing Hope Family Counseling Center for the last 2 years and 7 months, I do therapy with children, couples, individuals, adolescents, and families, teaching them how to deal with anxiety, depression, LGBTQIA+ issues, all kinds of things. And it's been such a joy to return to the therapist chair after such a long time away. But even during those years when I wasn't allowed to practice, I never lost my passion for this work. And I hope to continue doing it in whatever capacity I'm allowed for as long as I live. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Crawford, any questions?
Yes. In your initial period of probation, there was a petition to revoke because you hadn't worked in 3 years. Was that, well, what was the basis for you not working for those 3 years?
Well, I had that psychological evaluation in February of 2014,
Mhm.
and I was found to be unsafe to practice.
Okay.
So they said I had to do 2 years of therapy, and then they were going to evaluate me again. But I did 1 year, and then my therapist had that life-threatening health episode. So I wasn't able to finish the second year because I wasn't able to practice and I wasn't working, seeing clients. I didn't have any income or insurance coverage. So finding a therapist who was willing to do the second year before the needed evaluation to be cleared just didn't work out.
So it took 3 years to eventually get you cleared to work again?
No, they revoked my probation before I fought it with an attorney to get
Okay.
back on track.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they revoked it. I didn't hear from the board in 18 months, and they revoked without even communicating with me.
And then when your probation was, or when your license was put on probation again, kind of anew, it was told for 4 years, from 2018 to 2022.
Well, I participated in a second psychological evaluation to make sure I was okay. And again, that evaluation came back very negatively. So at that time, I had another administrative hearing in San Diego in 2019. And that's where that order comes from to deny the second petition to revoke. And then I participated in a third psychological evaluation that cleared me from the first two.
So in 2019, in that second petition to revoke probation, the order was that you could continue to work while on probation.
No, I had to do the third one and be cleared first.
Okay.
And then I had my CPS job. So even though I was cleared in 2019,
Mhm.
I stayed with CPS for a while and then found this job where I currently work.
And when was the third evaluation?
Let me find it in my email. I'm sorry. Didn't bring a copy with me.
Mr. Johnson, so if you say anything out loud, our court reporter has to take it down. So you have to say it in the microphone. Otherwise, you can just not say it out loud.
I'm sorry. I was just going to check my email to see if I can find the date of the third psychological evaluation.
Do you remember the year?
I think it was in 2019, a year after the 2018 evaluation.
Okay.
And then I stayed with CPS until 2022. And then I started working clinically again. But that was my choice to stay told
Mhm.
until 2022, just because I was enjoying the work with children and family services.
And you didn't need any kind of licensure or registration for that job?
No, I was simply a social services practitioner, they call it.
And you said you believe the third evaluation in 2019 did clear you to be able to return to work as a therapist?
Yes, he clearly took the first two and debunks them both bit by bit. Kind of explains why they came to the conclusions they came to, and then comes to his own conclusion at the end.
And what was the name of that,
Dr. Garman?
Garmin?
Mhm.
Okay. And you stated that you chose to extend your tolling status because you were enjoying the work you were doing with CPS. Okay, so
Is that a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
in 2022, what happened that caused you to want to return to practice and lift your tolling status?
My probation analyst was encouraging me to return to clinical practice to avoid further issues with my probation, because I'd been told on off and on for a while. So he was encouraging me to move forward with my probation term.
Did you say you are still with CPS?
No, I currently work with a private practice for therapy.
Is that some place you want to stay?
Yes,
So you do want to pursue a more clinical practice?
yes,
And you're still seeing a therapist once a week?
yes, I am.
What are the issues that you've been able to address that have helped you move forward?
For me, taking responsibility for my actions, particularly past mistakes. I was raised in a family where perfectionism was kind of accentuated. So when we made mistakes growing up, it was easy to kind of place blame on other people or place blame on the situation. So as you can imagine, when I first got placed on probation, I had a tendency in the early stages of probation to blame law enforcement, the board, everyone but myself. So taking responsibility for my choices, my mistakes, my actions, my part in things is one of the things. Also becoming more self-aware of who I really am versus who others want me to be. I'm kind of a people pleaser. So we've been working on becoming more authentic and living a more authentic life.
And with regards to your supervised practice, can you tell us about incidents where you found that supervision particularly helpful to your practice?
Yes, I've had a wonderful clinical supervisor at my current employ. Um, she doesn't mess around. She's very direct. Um, she calls me kind of the big teddy bear of the clinic because I think she thinks I'm a little too soft on some of our clients. She's a little bit more able to call people out and to pull their covers. So she does that with me when I'm trying to minimize or avoid conflictual things or um, trying to be too soft about my cases. She'll be like, Scott, we need to do this, we need to do that. And she kind of holds me accountable to those decisions.
So have you stated you've been on probation a lengthy period of time, over a decade. There's been really only 2.5 years of that probation period where you've been employed and actively participating in your probation terms. So why do you believe that you are ready to terminate early in light of the fact that you've only recently had the opportunity to participate in your probation?
That's a good question. Thank you for asking. Um, because even though I've only been working clinically on probation for maybe a total of 3 years or so, because I was working clinically when I first got on probation in 2013
Mhm.
until May of 2014. So almost a first year there too, before being pronounced dangerous to practice. Um, I've had to do the body fluid testing off and on during periods where I wasn't told. I've remained sober the entire time. I've been doing quarterly reports. I've submitted 42 quarterly reports to the board over the last 11 years. I haven't broken any laws other than the fix-it tickets I mentioned. Um, I've been fully compliant in every way, um, barring the clinical practice piece because of the difficulty I had being cleared to practice with the psychological evaluations. but I have been actively employed in the human services vein.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, I'm now going to ask our board members if they have any questions, starting to my right with our board chair.
I'm Chris Jones, LEP member and board chair. Thank you for being here and for giving us your testimony. I did want to explore a little bit more comment that you made, and I appreciate that you brought it up about taking responsibility, because there is a lot of documentation here about how the issues that you were going through were the responsibility of other people. And I'm hearing that you're acknowledging that you've learned through therapy how to take responsibility. Can you say a little bit more about that and what was the turning point, and how does that both inform your current practice and help to make you safe to practice with your clients?
Sure, thank you. That's a good question. I think when I was younger, I was just kind of fixated on this idea that I needed to be a perfect person. And today, I no longer maintain that belief. I find beauty in my imperfection, and I know that I'm acceptable with all my flaws. And so, as someone who accepts themselves for who they are genuinely and completely, it's much easier to take responsibility when you do wrong. One of the 12 steps is to, when you do wrong, promptly admit it. So working the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous has really been a part of this process as well, helping me to recognize those instances in my daily life where I do wrong, where I think things wrong, and, having the opportunity to admit it and to make amends and make things right. So now clinically, when I encounter a client who, much like how I used to be, is kind of consumed with this idea of maybe themselves or their spouse has to be perfect in order for them to be happy, I encourage them to, give themselves grace and to accept themselves where they are, and to experience what that feels like, you know, give themselves permission to be human, as I've done myself. And, especially in couples therapy, giving your partner permission to be human does wonders for your marital satisfaction scores. Things tend to go way up when you begin to see your partner as just a person with flaws and idiosyncrasies and problems, just like you. And you no longer have to be this knight in shining armor, nor she or he, angelic, person making a perfect dinner when you come home at night. But no, it's been very profound. Accepting myself for who I am has brought me immense freedom and power. Being free from playing the blame game and playing that victim role is very, it's liberating. Showing up here to a hearing with my husband at a time when, the LGBT community is being kind of marginalized again, it feels good. It feels good. And I'm proud to be who I am today. When this first started, I probably would have shown up at an event like this alone and not even mentioned my spouse. So working with my therapist on accepting responsibility for my part in why my life is the way it is today has really been healing, and I encourage my clients to do the same, and other people in AA as well.
Thank you. And how, just the last part of my question, how does that equate to you being safe to practice,
Okay.
independently without probation.
Thank you. Um, well, if I'm able to take responsibility for my mistakes, I'm less likely to make them, if that makes sense. So if I'm no longer trying to hide what I'm doing or trying to cover up my transgressions, kind of what you see is what you get. And if I'm living more truly to myself, I will be a more law-abiding, rule-keeping, ethical clinician in the field of marriage and family therapy. Um, I think I was before, um, but I derailed myself as I became confused about my identity and who I wanted to be and who I was. I allowed those confusing years to kind of get me off the path.
Thank you. I appreciate your responses. No further questions.
Continuing to my right.
John Sovak, LMFT. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your experience with us. Before I ask my questions, Your Honor, I actually have some guidance questions from you. Since we're talking about psych evals, we have limited information in our packets about the psych evals. And in fact, the Garmin eval is not mentioned at all any place in our packet. And I want some guidance on what kind of questions I can ask in an open room, in an open hearing.
So the issue with regards to the evaluation is relevant to the extent that it relates to the whether or not he's safe to practice. And so I guess we'll have to take it question by question to see how far you need to go to get what you need. I always like to think of it like this. Do I need to know the answer to this question in order to make a decision in this case? So if you ask yourself that question, then that helps you determine whether or not it's in fact relevant and a necessary question.
Perfect. Then yes, I have a couple of questions. I'll ask them slowly. So if you need to cut in and cut me off, please feel
Thank
free
you.
to
I
do so.
appreciate that, yes. And I also want to remind Mr. Johnson that he can object to any question that's asked. So if you have an objection to a question, I'll find out why you're objecting, and then I'll make a decision on whether or not you need to answer the question. All right?
Okay.
So you've reported to us about the report, the psych eval from Dr. Garmin. We don't have any information in our packets about that particular report. So I was curious about who initiated that eval.
I think it was me when I appeared before the administrative law judge in 2019. I represented myself and I had the opportunity to cross-examine the former psychological evaluator in the administrative law room. And in her write-up about my mental fitness to practice, she praised me quite generously about the kind of therapist she thought I was and the kind of person she thought I was. So her diagnosis, the dangerous one, did not match the description of me as a clinician and me as a person. So then the judge's suggestion was, well, why don't we have you do another one and see what comes of it? And I agreed. I think something like that went down. But it may have been ordered, it may have been part of the new 5-year term that I undergo a fresh one. To be honest, today I'm a little foggy. It may have just been part of the regular 5 years that I was granted. So rather than continuing my existing 5-year term, which had been revoked, I think he just issued a new 5-year term with all the same terms and conditions as before. I think that's more correct, if that makes sense. Because the original 5-year term,
My brain is trying to process.
the original 5-year term included a psychological evaluation. And so the new 5-year term also included one.
So in the pursuit of this case, there have been a total of 3 psychological evaluations?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So there's an initial evaluation which had concerns about the ability to practice. And then there was a second evaluation which also had concerns about ability to practice.
Those first two came back with the exact same diagnoses each time.
And then you intimated in some of your testimony um, in the previous cases that you felt there might have been some type of collusion or conversation between those 2 evaluators?
Well, each time, as I understand it, each time you are asked by the board to give an evaluation, you are sent the previous evaluator's evaluation. So it's not objective, meaning the evaluator has access to the previous evaluation about the subject.
And you had even mentioned in previous testimony that they were across the hall from each other and you felt that they had talked to each other. That's
Yeah.
your opinion.
I felt that day when I met with the second person that yes, they had talked, but I don't have any proof of that. That was my feeling. Because it was such a similar result each time.
Okay. What do you think, in your experience of doing testing with Dr. Garman, allowed him to see a different aspect of you than these 2 other evaluations?
Well, for one, he had me come to his office on 3 different occasions, and he administered a wider range of testing techniques. We did the Rorschach test. We did I don't know if the Rorschach and the ink blot are the same, but we did a wide variety and an oral interview, 3 different visits, and then he had me do some online multiple choice assessments that were different from what the first 2 evaluators had used. Because I told him what my concerns were. But beyond that, I don't know. The first 2 evaluators were female. I never met the first one, so I don't know her age or appearance. But the second one was a young woman, younger than myself. And then Dr. Garman was an older man, older than myself. I don't know if that plays a role. Maybe he was more experienced.
Do you believe that there was any growth or change in yourself between those evaluations that may have given him a different experience of you?
Actually, yes, John, I think that's a good point to make. After having the opportunity to cross-examine Dr. Mesereau in the administrative hearing, I did have a sense of peace and satisfaction. I think I went into the 3rd evaluation with a more positive, hopeful mindset, and I was able to, as has been spoken of already today, take more responsibility for my actions. Also keeping in mind, by this point, it had been almost a decade since my DUI versus the first psych eval was only a year or just a few months after my first probation term had begun. So I was very angry and resentful for that first one, whereas with Dr. Garman, 9 years had passed. So that might have, yeah, I think I was more mature, more able to take responsibility for my part in things, for sure.
And then one kind of last, it may be 1, it may be 2 questions, kind of switching gears here a second. In looking at your letters from the people who are supporting you, they're all very glowing. And the most recent ones are more like letter of reference energy. They don't necessarily cue up that it's about this particular case. And I'm just curious, what did you ask them to write a letter to represent you for?
Can you tell me which ones in particular?
Now you have to give me a moment.
Okay.
So if we look at Sherry Lynn Malote, this is a very glowing letter of reference from October 7th, 2024. It talks about high sense of value and faith, competent therapist, but it doesn't actually do any context to saying, I'm aware of the board's disciplinary actions and I want to respond to that, which we often look for in these types of letters. So I'm curious, what did you ask them to write for you?
Well, most of them, that's a good question. Most of them, including Sherry, my coworker, she's well aware. She's licensed by the same board as I am. We work together every day. She's well aware of the ups and downs of my situation. She knows when I have to test for the board. I don't know why she chose not to address it in her letter. But those other letters from people from AA or church, they're a little bit less aware of the whole situation. I don't often share in an AA meeting all the details of my saga, mostly because there's many people sharing at an AA meeting, and I don't want to take up the entire meeting. Does that answer your question? Kind of?
Ish.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, Sherry and my employer, Cassandra, they are well aware, and they're both licensed MFTs with the same BBS.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, continuing to my right with any additional questions?
Hi, thank you for being here today. This
You
is
could get-
Abigail.
Go ahead.
This is Abigail Ortega, LCSW member. I just had it's a little bit of a broad question, but I guess why do you believe you're ready and safe, right, to return to full practice? And I guess what would you say to anyone who's like uncertain about that?
Could you repeat the second part
Yeah,
of the?
like, what would you say to someone who maybe is uncertain, right? Because you've done 2 years of the probation.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Well, I think that's a good question. Thank you. I can see why the board would be concerned seeing my term as only a 2.5 year completion. But from my family's perspective and my personal perspective, it's been 11 hard years of being on probation. My therapist license on the BBS website has been on probation for 11 years since my intern registration number was issued in October of 2013. So it has impacted employment opportunities, my professional reputation, my ability to get licensed fully. You know, most of my colleagues from graduate school have been long licensed. So even though it's only been 2.5 years of this new 5-year term, I still lived through the first 5 years and all the backs and forwards of that first 5 years, and I've never relapsed. Or in my mind, it's been a decade or more. So in that time, just because I wasn't seeing clients, I was working with families, parents, children, and never had a complaint, never had any issues. And so if I could be a CPS child abuse investigator or a CPS case carrying social worker successfully, why can't I be a therapist, which is what I did from 2001 till 2014 before my negative psych eval result came back. And never had a complaint with the board prior to that psychological evaluation. So I'm eager to continue doing good in the communities that I work in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. John, did you have a question? No?
Continuing to, yes.
Okay, this is Eleanor Uribe. Okay.
Hi.
So if you could like rewind your life and then you were to go back to the initial incident when, I guess, I don't know if you were arrested. And so if you were the therapist and at that point, what would you have done the same or different? In a sense, what would be like a treatment plan you would have given for yourself that you think would have been helpful?
Well, that particular night in March of 2010, when I chose to drive home under the influence of alcohol, um, I would have called my roommate to come and pick me up from the karaoke place where I was, or I would have called a taxi. This was in the days before Uber and Lyft. So I would have called a taxi or simply gotten a ride from my roommate. I wouldn't have chosen to drive.
So I'm actually saying after that happened. So say you couldn't have prevented any of that, and say you had been the client coming in for therapy. What do you think would have been a good plan to help you get back on track, given everything you were feeling, or do you feel like you needed the time? So what, if you were the treating therapist, what would have been a good plan for yourself?
I see. I'm sorry, I misunderstood before. I think I would have encouraged myself to work on accepting my sexual identity and work on decreasing self-destructive behaviors that I was engaging in. I would encourage myself as a client not to abuse alcohol, not to push family and friends away because they were still active members of the LDS Church, but rather try to stay connected to those good friends and family members and try to maintain those relationships instead of isolating and pulling away, kind of self-destructing. I would have encouraged myself at that point to begin attending Alcoholics Anonymous and plugging into the wonderful community of friends that I have today at an earlier stage. I think a lot of my victimizing and blaming behavior could have been avoided had I had the spiritual awakening of the 12 steps, a few years before I did.
Thank you for answering that. And last one is there any of the 12 steps that you really, that you resonate towards?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. At the beginning of every AA meeting that I go to a meeting in Hemet called the Attitude Adjustment Meeting at 7 a.m. Monday through Sunday. It's every day, 7 days a week. And I try to go at least 5 times a week. But we offer what is called the 7th step prayer, that is based on the 3rd step. And it goes like this: God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen. And then in answer to your question, Ms. Uribe, the 3rd step goes like this. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So as you're working the 12 steps, I think this one is critical because it kind of shifts your focus from yourself, from all the self-centeredness, self-pity, the victimizing, playing the victim, and shifting it outward towards others. You know, you're turning your will and your life over to the care of God, and you're seeking to do His will. And then kind of a runner-up favorite step to that one is the 12th step that says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's what I try to do today, in whether it's school district, CPS, therapy, church, choir. I try to be an example of service and compassion to everyone that I come in contact with.
Okay, thank you for answering.
All right, and then to my left.
Wendy Strack, Board Vice Chair, Public Member. I just have one question. So your DUI was in 2010, but your sobriety date is in 2013. It kind of seems to correspond to probation beginning with BBS. Was that the impetus for your sobriety, or were there other driving factors when you, from that October 2013 date?
Unfortunately, yes, I would say that the BBS probation was kind of one of the heaviest factors contributing to my desire to get sober, completely sober. I guess I was kind of delusionally thinking that since I had been convicted of a reckless driving charge, that the board would somehow not come down on me as heavy-handed as they chose to do. And I know that looking back now, that was ridiculous of me to think that way. But I was just kind of hoping beyond hope. And I think the board was waiting until my conviction was finalized, and that didn't happen until 2012, I think, which also contributed to my delay. But I'll tell you, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have postponed. I didn't recognize in those days what a dangerous position I was in with alcohol at that point in my life. As I said before, I hadn't started drinking until my early 30s, so I just didn't understand how dangerous it could be. I never thought that I would ever have a DUI, which sounds so stupid to say aloud, but it's true. You know, you're raised in a alcohol-free zone, you know, in the state of Utah, and you just don't think that will ever happen to you, but it can, and it does to many thousands of people actually, but not in my family, you know, and I'm the only one in my family so far. Knock on wood, but yeah, unfortunately, it was the board's decision that encouraged me to make that decision for myself. But I am grateful that I did. I am eternally grateful, and my life is so wonderful today. Even if my therapy career were to fall apart tomorrow, I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life, without question.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Any questions from Mr. Huft?
Yes, thank you. Justin Huft,
I was
LMFT
asking to
member.
take it out of order. Yeah, I was, our board chair just asked us to take you out of order because you have a time constraint. So any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here, Dr. Johnson. I just want to make sure I'm getting the order right. You saw Dr. Harrell in roughly 2014, and then Mesereau in 2018-ish. And then when did you see Garmin?
To 2019.
2019. Okay. And there was some notable difference in growth between 2018 and 2019 that resulted in part in a different diagnosis?
Yes.
Okay. You have been at your family counseling center since roughly 2022. As an AMFT, you're tracking your hours. Roughly how many supervised clinical hours do you have? Very roughly.
I've submitted my hours for licensure. I'm waiting to hear back from the board on a test date currently.
Great. Roughly how many supervised clinical hours do you have?
I think when I turned in my packet several months ago, I was about 3,500 hours.
3,500 hours total or supervised clinical?
Supervised clinical hours, yes, sorry. And then before that, before my first probation term, I had accrued over 4,000 supervised clinical hours that were not submitted before my DUI.
Okay.
And that was my own fault.
Okay. Excellent. No further questions. Thank you.
All right, continuing to my left with any additional questions?
Board members, Callie Runnisinger, public member. Dr. Johnson, you stated in your original statement, I'm quoting here, the arresting officer was very cruel and stole my license. At the time the officer took your license, was it suspended or revoked?
No, it was current. It was simply an out-of-state license.
And you also stated in February of 2014, you underwent the first of 3 psychological evaluations. The first one found you dangerous to practice. And then you used the term kind of a bait and switch modality. Why did you say that?
Yeah, maybe that was a little bit harsh, but I found it very hard at that time to go to weekly therapy, to work with my therapist on a dangerous diagnosis that made me unfit to practice without knowing what we were working on. He was not allowed to tell me what the diagnosis was that I had been given.
Let me stop you there because I'm a little confused, because when you were speaking to board member Sovek and answering his questions, you said both of the psychological evaluations came back with the same diagnosis. So which 2 diagnoses were you talking about?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, it is confusing. So in 2014, when I received that first diagnosis from Dr. Harrell, I did not know what her clinical conclusions were. However, fast forward to the administrative law hearing in 2019, counsel for the board, because I was representing myself, sent me the materials they had gathered for the hearing. And in their materials, they included segments from both Dr. Harrell's evaluation of me and Dr. Mesereau's evaluation of me. That was the first time that I had been given any information about either diagnoses. And so that's what I used for my cross-examination of Dr. Mesereau, but I have never seen the complete evaluations. That's why I say it was kind of a bait and switch modality, because I've never been given either of those first two write-ups. I've only ever been sent Dr. Garman's complete evaluation.
You said that the 3rd evaluation, quote, debunked the first 2 evaluations. Why exactly do you use the term debunked?
Well, because that's exactly what he did. He took Dr. Harrell's evaluation and he goes through several paragraphs saying, Dr. Harrell used this tool, and this is why she came to the conclusion she did based upon my experience of Dr. Johnson. But my findings find this, this, and this, which contradict her findings in this and this and this way. And he did the same thing with Dr. Mesereau's evaluation, kind of a side-by-side, play-by-play,
Okay.
step by step.
And you're currently seeing Ms. Shockey Pope, and she gives you clean bill and that she's recommending termination of probation.
Yes.
Okay. And this is my last question. I want to read you a line from the 2013 Statement of Issues after a decision of non-adoption. This was about 12 years ago. It's on page A48. It states, respondent repeatedly demonstrates a troubling pattern of blaming others for the results of his own actions. Do you believe you've addressed this problem of holding yourself accountable for your own actions?
Yes, I do. That statement was part of the information I was given in my 2019 hearing prep. And it was very troubling to see what Dr. Mesereau had written about me. And that's also been a matter of public record on the BBS website since that time. And some of my clients had actually read those words and brought them to my attention in session as well. So yes, I do genuinely believe that in therapy and with my sponsor from Alcoholics Anonymous and in my marriage with my husband and with our pastor, I have striven to improve my ability to be responsible for the wrongs that I commit and the mistakes I made and continue to make. I'm a much more responsible, happy person today than I was during those interviews.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, Susan Friedman, public member. Thank you so much for being here. I just have one quick question, sort of following up on that. Your whole journey sounds to me like the journey to maturity, and that you started out as a very immature person, and today you come to us as the mature person. But going back to those days when you were blaming other people and giving excuses and everything, that kind of relates to what you told you learned in your family, which was to always blame others for mistakes or something that you did wrong. Is that correct? And is that completely gone from your present day work that you're doing?
I think that is only partially correct, Susan. My parents are wonderful people. They brought 7 of us into the world. I am number 6 of the 7. But I think due to a combination of factors, you know, my cerebral palsy being one, and being the youngest of 5 brothers being maybe another thing, I found myself trying to maybe overcompensate for areas of my life in which I didn't excel. You know, I've never been good at sports, for example. I'm not a good runner, I'm not at all athletic. And so somewhere along the line, I began to feel like I wasn't good enough. So in order to maintain the status quo and kind of keep up with my siblings, I just felt the need to kind of sugarcoat things. And then that became, you know, as I started realizing I was gay and that wasn't appropriate in my former religion, you know, you can't just be, it's hard to be something that's not acceptable in that community. So
The question is whether or not you've been able to absolutely get rid of that part of your personality and realize that it was part of your personality and you don't want it there anymore.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I thought I missed the moment earlier. Okay, thank you for being here today, Mr. Johnson. I just want to bring us back to the present, okay? If possible, if we do look back, let's just go back 2.5 years. of the probation that you've completed, okay? Because the ultimate outcome here is consumer protection, okay? So I'm trying to get in a place in my mind where I can deliberate with my board and discuss whether you're safe to practice, okay? So if I can just pull my question together, maybe one question with 3 different parts. And just directly, I'm going to ask you, do you deem yourself safe to practice today?
Yes, I do.
And why would you say that? Just looking back no further than the 2.5 years that you've completed so far, the terms of your probation.
Because I make every effort to be ethical, to make informed decisions in the care of my clients, to follow the guidance and direction of my clinical supervisors,
Mhm.
and to do no harm to the adults and children in my care.
What parts of the past 2.5 years, based on what you just said, that you feel deem you safe to practice, what part of the process have you most benefited from within those terms? How did you get to make that statement? What brought you there?
I think participating in group supervision each week with my colleagues and my clinical supervisor, consulting on cases, learning from others' case presentations, participating in continuing education units in the maintenance of my AMFT license. We are constantly looking for new ways to help our clientele. Right now, we utilize something called the QB test to assess for ADHD and impulsivity, which has been wonderful. It's a tool developed in Sweden. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful 2.5 years.
I'm going to pick up on that and then get to the end of my question. And I appreciate that you just said that, because in my notes, I made a point to note how you said where you are today in your life. Happily married, you're in a church, a welcoming, supportive environment that you believe accepts you for who you are today. That's what we're dealing with today. And that you enjoy singing and traveling and hiking and getting back to nature and things like that. I think it's very important that I see that full picture of you today, okay? So now moving forward, 2.5 years remaining on your probation. What is it in the process that no longer serves you, or do you feel that you would not continue to benefit from if you're, you understand? Okay.
That's an interesting way to phrase the question. All of the terms and conditions have been beneficial. The college coursework, I really enjoyed doing those as a middle-aged man with these young college kids, for example. And I have loved my therapist. She stood by me during the tail end of the first 5 years, and here we are again, 2.5 years into the second 5 years. I love her, and I admire her work ethic very much. Even the random body fluid testing is helpful because it keeps me accountable and it keeps me desirous of remaining sober. I wish it was more affordable. I do spend about $200 a month on testing supplies alone. But it's worth it, it's worth it to demonstrate my sobriety. But, it's not about being free of the probation. It's just about having that status updated so that I'm eligible for different kinds of opportunities as a middle-aged clinician. I've kind of been in a associate mode for too long, and I want to go on and get licensed and move forward with my career.
Thank you for fully answering my questions. I have no further
Just checking in one more time, and there's no additional questions. Mr. Huft, any additional questions? No.
No, thank you.
All right, Ms. Crawford, anything further?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Any closing remarks?
No.
Is the matter submitted?
Yes.
Anything in closing, Mr. Johnson?
I just want to say thank you to all of you. I know I'm the last one today. Thank you for being here today and for being a part of my hearing.
Matter submitted for the board's consideration?
Yes.
All right, matter submitted, and the record is closed. We are off the record. All right, thank you. You are free to go.
All right, thank you. We will take a 10-minute break to clear the room and move into closed session. Our next agenda item is the election of the board chairperson and vice chairperson. We are going to hand over this part of the agenda to Sabina Knight, our legal counsel, and Steve Sodergren, our executive director.
Yeah, and Sabina will definitely kind of handle the actual voting procedure. I was just going to be up here just to explain a little bit about, I mean, it's not really answering your questions, but just the basics where every year we do have to vote on a chair and vice chair. And this newly elected individual will hold their position until the next round of elections, which will occur in May 2026. And the primary goal is for the board chair and vice chair to execute the board's mission. And to achieve this, you, the board's chair, vice chair, collaborate closely with me and staff to make sure that we are moving forward on our goals and mission. And some of the duties that the chairperson include definitely regular meetings and communication with the board executive officer, myself, and also chairing and facilitating board meetings. Usually the chair is also included in the policy and advocacy committee meetings. So they usually facilitate those meetings. The other great thing that hopefully the new chairperson will like is composing messages for the board's newsletter, the quarter newsletter, or any other thing they want to actually, compose, and they can give to us. So also, they're in charge of assigning board members to various committees and making appointments to the committee chair, making appointments of the committee chairs, and acting as the official spokesperson for the board. So it can be, and that's like a very important part of it. You're front and center within this kind of this forum here, and so you will be at times answering kind of for the board, either here or if we have some sort of issues come up, you would help address those. So, and a time constraint, I mean, the time involvement, you have to review the agendas coming up for the board meetings, consult about board meeting agendas and maybe what we want to put on that, and work with the board to work with the staff to coordinate things. So it can be, and I don't know, Chris, would you like to add anything about commitment, time commitment?
The time commitment's a little bit more than what we do here when we come to the meetings. I think the extra work, I meet with Steve every other week it depends, up to an hour, just to get the insight as to what is going on behind the scenes of the board and things that are coming up in the future and that we need to start focusing on, projects that are going on. It's more informative than anything. The every other week was my choice because I wanted to be active. Recently, I had to come up here to testify for our sunset hearing, which was great. You're more involved in the sunset review process. You're more involved in the strategic planning. You're more involved in some of the other, not disciplinary things, but like the projects that are coming up. They want your eyes on it and your opinion about kind of where it should move forward, things like that. So I would say that it's not a substantial time commitment, but it's definitely more intensive And then you chair all the meetings and, you know, try to herd all of my board members into the same place at the same time. Some of us are harder to keep in. Oh, sorry, did I say that out loud? Kidding. It's actually, I found it to be a very good experience. But that's because I'm a nerd and like to understand how things work. So it was, and I felt a need, not a need, but I felt a drive to serve. So that was my motivation, other than, you know, to do it. But I found it to be a very fulfilling experience, and that I think that especially with this board, I think in the last couple of years with me sitting here, that this board has done a tremendous amount of very positive work. I like the fact that we've added, you know, I'm going to get it wrong, Annette's committee, the
Outreach and education.
Outreach and Education Committee, how they've morphed the Workforce Committee. Steve has done a really good job of trying to streamline a lot of the processes that we have in place. So it's just kind of keeping your hand in all of the different little things that are going on, the details that people don't see, stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So there you go.
Any questions about the duties or roles or anything like that before we move forward?
How about the vice chair?
You have duties for that?
Well, historically, it's the vice chair will help in basically, you know, in case the chairperson is vacant or not present, the vice chair will take over any of those duties that are aforementioned. And also, I mean, honestly, we've been really just communication between the chairperson and myself, but I think moving forward, maybe kind of a new step is really involving the vice chair a little bit more too now, as we move forward. So they will be more involved, and I think definitely making those decisions. So it's really a backup and a support in case needed.
And every quarter too, there's a chair, DCA chair meeting that you sit in with all of the different chairs from all the different boards to kind of get DCA updates and hear what other people are doing on their boards. So that's always super interesting. I know it's terrible. So yeah, it's interesting to see how all the different boards work and their kind of philosophies on things.
And then I guess just as my experience as vice chair, I've had the occasion to back up Chris when he hasn't been able to attend meetings and run the meetings. I have been attending all of the board chair trainings that are offered by DCS, and have been able to work closely with Steve on any questions that we have. I've been chair of the now Workforce Development Committee meeting for quite some time, and even before when it was licensing. So I've had the pleasure of becoming a part of that committee, but also overseeing a lot of the changes in direction that take what the conversations that we have at the board level and really work with Steve and the staff and the committee members to implement those. And I think we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of progress on the workforce development space and streamlining licensing while still protecting consumers. And so I've been proud to be a part of that. I'm also a member of the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting, which is a lot of where my own personal professional experience lies. And so I have really enjoyed being a part of that and helping to drive the policy that supports the great work that we do. So the vice chair, you know, always depending on chairs and stuff, I think has a variety of roles. But I've been happy to work with Chris and support Chris in his efforts. I would agree with Steve and his comments that perhaps going forward, you know, integrating the vice chair a little bit more, and some of those things kind of maybe even as it gets closer to a potential transition time. So I'll take any questions.
Any other questions about duties or responsibilities? Sunset's one of the huge ones for the chair, huge. Because I'm sure it's very stressful having to go out and up in front of legislature and answer those questions, and you're on the hot seat and responsible for the board, basically. Yeah. So think on your feet, and so that's a hard part of the job. Okay. Any other questions before we get started? No? Okay, so we're going to do it in order of chairperson, and then we'll do vice chairperson. We'll take nominations for chairperson, and just like any other motion, you need a nomination and a second, and then we'll double check to see if there are any additional nominations, and if that other nomination also gets a second, and then we'll take each of them and vote, and we'll do a vote on each. If say you have 3, right? And so we'll take them each in turn in the order. Okay. All right, so we'll open the floor for any nominations for chairperson.
I would like to, I've really enjoyed being the board president for the last couple of years. But I believe that in order to build capacity, you can't have the same person sitting in the chair forever. So I would like to nominate our vice chair, Wendy Strack, as the new chair for the board.
You accept? Okay. I need a second.
I'll second.
All right, that's first. Do we have any additional nominations? Okay, seeing none, would you like to make a statement before we go out for public comment? Okay. Do we have any, no public comment in the room on this motion? Can we check with the online audience?
We have one maybe. We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button. You'll have 2 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 15-second warning before your time expires. Seeing no request, would you like to continue with the motion?
Thank you so much. So we have a motion and a second. We have a nomination and a second for Wendy for chairperson of the board for this new year. Any additional comments or discussion before we do a vote? Okay. Christina?
Yes. Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
Wendy Strack,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
John Sovek,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
and the nomination, congratulations, you're the chair.
All right, congratulations. Do you want to say anything now?
Wait till the chairperson.
Just, I appreciate the confidence and support of such an amazing board. It's just a privilege and an honor to work alongside all of you as we look to better the delivery and services of our industry. So I just appreciate it. Thank you, and look forward to continuing all the great work we're doing.
Excellent. Okay, so the last item for today's agenda before we recess until tomorrow is nominations for vice chair. So same thing, we're going to take nominations in a second and then make sure they accept. And then we'll gather up our nominations and then we will do our vote. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Kelly,
I'd like to nominate, oops, we have hands up. John Sovek.
all third.
Sabina, I would like to respectfully decline the nomination.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure he appreciates the thought.
Can we nominate people who aren't here?
Correct. You can.
Oh, you can't?
You can.
I nominate Nick Boyd.
Okay, I have confirmed that he would accept that nomination should he have been here.
Second.
How'd you confirm that so quick?
Well, ahead of time. I'm really good at this.
ESP.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Dr. Annette Walker.
And I respectfully decline, but thank you.
You're trying to get back at her.
I would like to nominate Kelly Ranasini.
Thank you, Board Member Uribe. I respectfully decline.
By you. No, you nominate yourself. Any others?
And you can nominate yourself.
You
If
can
you're not
nominate
hearing
yourself.
your voice being thrown in the ring, you can.
You can, Chris. No.
Sabina, Justin Huff. I'd like to nominate Justin Huff for vice chair.
I do not have that information.
Oh. Okay. In that case, I will withdraw my nomination.
Yeah, I don't know. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second for Nick Boyd for vice chair. Can we, no public comment in the room? Do we have any public comment online for this motion?
We are open for public comment via WebEx on the vice chair nomination. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Any other further discussion or additional nominations before we try this vote? No?
Okay, here's a vote. Dr. Annette Walker? Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe?
Yes.
Wendy Strack?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
John Sovek?
Yes.
Abigail Ortega?
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe?
Yes.
Motion, congratulations, Nick. If you're listening, you're the vice chair.
Okay, and with that, we will recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m., correct? All right, we'll see you guys, everyone tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have a great evening. Thank you.